Welcome to my channel, Value Old Coins. Today videos is one you won't to miss. We're diving into the world of coins. So let's get it started. The 1965 D. Washington quarter is an especially intriguing subject in the long-running history of American coinage, and its story blends together art, economics, politics, and the everyday use of money in mid-20th century America. To begin with, the Washington quarter itself was introduced in 1932 to honor the bicentennial of George Washington's birth, replacing the standing Liberty quarter. Designed by John Flanagan, it features the familiar profile of Washington on the obverse and the powerful heraldic eagle on the reverse. For more than 6 decades, this design defined the quarter dollar and became one of the most recognized pieces of circulating coinage in U.S. history. The year 1965 marked a turning point in American numismatics. Prior to this date, all Washington quarters minted for circulation were struck in 90% silver and 10% copper, giving them intrinsic bullion value. But in the early 1960s, rising silver prices caused widespread hoarding of dimes, quarters, and half-dollars, leading to severe coin shortages across the nation. People pulled silver coins out of circulation for their metal value, vending machines were starved of coins, and the U.S. Mint was pressured to find a solution. In response, Congress passed the Coinage Act of 1965, which authorized a change in composition. Instead of silver, quarters, and dimes would be struck in a clad composition, consisting of a pure copper core bonded to outer layers of 75% copper and 25% nickel. This gave the coins a silvery appearance but removed silver entirely. The new clad coins were harder, more durable, and most importantly, cheaper to produce. Thus, the 1965 Washington quarter became the first clad quarter in U.S. history, a landmark moment that defined American circulation coinage going forward. Interestingly, the Denver Mint did not produce quarters in 1965. During the transitional years of 1965 through 1967, the U.S. Mint suspended the use of mint marks altogether. This was done deliberately to discourage hoarding and speculation, since collectors had been setting aside large quantities of coins from specific mints, worsening the shortage. As a result, all quarters dated 1965, regardless of whether they were actually struck in Philadelphia or Denver, bear no mint mark. This means that technically there is no such thing as a 1965 D Washington quarter. Any quarter with a 1965 date and a D mint mark would be considered a counterfeit or altered coin, as no such issue was ever officially produced. The only genuine 1965 quarters are mint markless clad issues, struck in Philadelphia, though they circulated nationwide. This fact makes the 1965 date unique in numismatic history. It symbolizes the beginning of the clad era and the unusual suspension of mint marks. The obverse design of the 1965 quarter carries John Flanagan's classic bust of George Washington, facing left. His hair, tied back in a colonial-style ribbon, is rendered with fine detail, though in many circulated examples the high points of his hair and cheek show wear. Above his head arches the word liberty, a proud declaration of the nation's foundational ideal. To the left of Washington's profile is the inscription, "In God We Trust," the national motto that reflects the spiritual and cultural heritage of the United States. Beneath the bust lies the date 1965, significant both as a historical marker of change and as a reminder of the mid-1960s, a time of cultural upheaval in American life. The obverse is simple, balanced, and dignified, intended to honor the first president while also serving as a functional piece of everyday money. The reverse design also remains the work of Flanagan, a bold heraldic eagle with wings outstretched, in a commanding posture. The eagle clutches a bundle of arrows in its talons, representing the readiness of the United States to defend itself if threatened. Beneath the eagle rests an olive branch, a timeless symbol of peace. Together, these Elements strike a balance between strength and diplomacy, reminding the world of America's dual commitments to security and harmony. Above the eagle's head is the Latin motto, E pluribus unum, meaning, out of many, one, emphasizing the unity of the states. The rim at the top bears the words, United States of America, while the denomination, quarter dollar, curves along the bottom. This design had been in use since 1932 and would remain unchanged until the 1999 launch of the State Quarters program. The physical specifications of the 1965 quarter also illustrate the historic transition. It weighs 5.67 grams, slightly less than the 6.25 grams of the older silver issues. Its diameter is 24.3 millimeters with a reeded edge, small grooves along the side. Unlike silver coins, clad quarters reveal a copper-colored edge when examined closely because of the copper core sandwiched between the nickel outer layers. This is one of the easiest ways to distinguish a 1965 clad quarter from earlier 90% silver issues of 1964 and before. In terms of mintage and availability, the 1965 Washington quarter was produced in massive numbers, over 1.8 billion coins, to combat the coin shortage. As a result, it is extremely common in circulated condition, and most examples today are worth only their face value of 25 cents. However, the coin becomes more interesting in higher grades. In uncirculated condition, mint state, 1965 quarters may be valued between $3 and $20, depending on luster and strike quality. In exceptionally high grades, MS 66 and above, they may fetch $100 or more, with premium specimens certified as MS 67, commanding several $100s. Additionally, some rare transitional errors exist. A small number of 1965 quarters were accidentally struck on leftover 90% silver planchets intended for 1964 dated coins. These silver 1965 quarters are very rare and can be worth thousands of dollars, making them a sought-after prize in numismatics. Careful testing, weight, sound, and sometimes metallurgical analysis is required to distinguish such errors. The historical and cultural context of the 1965 quarter cannot be overstated. This coin embodies America during the mid-1960s, a period marked by the Vietnam War, civil rights struggles, the space race, and social change. In numismatics, it represented the United States government's pragmatic decision to prioritize economic stability over tradition, ending centuries of silver coinage in favor of modern clad compositions. For the everyday citizen, this was the quarter used in payphones, jukeboxes, parking meters, laundromats, and arcades. It was a coin that circulated widely in a nation undergoing profound transformation. Today, collectors who study or preserve the 1965 quarter are holding a tangible reminder of that era, a bridge between the classic silver age of American coinage and the modern base metal era still in use today. In summary, the 1965 Washington quarter is historically important as the first clad quarter, marking the end of silver circulation, coinage. Although there is no genuine 1965D quarter, since mint marks were suspended, the coin remains a cornerstone for collectors who study U.S. coinage transitions. It features John Flanagan's portrait of George Washington on the obverse, the heraldic eagle on the reverse, and is composed of copper-nickel clad. With a mintage of over 1.8 billion, it is common in circulated condition but valued in high, uncirculated grades and especially in rare silver error varieties. More than just pocket change, it represents the economic, cultural, and numismatic changes of the 1960s and is a coin that tells the story of an evolving America. The 1968D Washington quarter is a highly interesting and historically significant American coin, not only because of its placement within the long-running Washington quarter series, but also because it reflects the changes in U.S. coinage that came during the 1960s. Struck at the Denver Mint, as indicated by the small D mint mark on the obverse side of the coin to the right of George Washington's ponytail, above the date, this quarter was minted in large quantities to keep up with the demands of commerce in the United States. What sets the 1968 D quarter apart from earlier issues of the Washington quarter is that it belongs to the era after the dramatic shift in American coinage in 1965, when silver was removed from circulating dimes and quarters. Prior to that change, quarters contained 90% silver and 10% copper, but starting in 1965, they were struck in a copper-nickel-clad composition. The 1968 D quarter is therefore made of an inner core of pure copper, sandwiched between two outer layers of 75% copper and 25% nickel, giving it the silvery appearance of the earlier silver coins while actually containing no precious metal. This transformation was a turning point in U.S. monetary history, as the rising cost of silver had made it impractical for the mint to continue using the metal in circulating coins. On the obverse front design of the 1968 D quarter, 1, finds the familiar bust of George Washington, which was originally designed by sculptor John Flanagan in 1932 to honor the 200th anniversary of Washington's birth. Washington faces left, his profile sharply defined, with his hair tied back in a simple colonial-style ribbon. Above his head stretches the word Liberty in bold block letters, symbolizing the guiding principle of the United States. To the left of Washington's throat, in slightly smaller type, appears the inscription, "In God We Trust," the national motto that was first placed on U.S. coins during the Civil War and had become a standard feature by the 20th century. Beneath the bust lies the date 1968, marking the year of mintage, while the small D mint mark beside the date indicates the coin's production in Denver. The overall composition of the obverse presents a sense of dignity and respect for the nation's first president, making the Washington quarter both a workhorse of commerce and a tribute to America's heritage. Turning to the reverse back of the coin, the design features a majestic heraldic eagle, wings spread wide in a commanding pose. The eagle clutches a bundle of arrows in its talons, representing America's readiness to defend itself against threats, while beneath the arrows rests an olive branch, symbolizing the pursuit of peace. The combination of arrows and olive branch reflects the dual nature of the United States' identity as both a strong and peaceful nation. Above the eagle's head is the Latin motto, E pluribus unum, meaning out of many, one, a reference to the unity of the states forming one republic. The upper rim of the reverse is inscribed with United States of America, while the denomination quarter dollar is inscribed along the lower rim. This reverse design, like the obverse, was created by John Flanagan and remained largely unchanged from 1932 until the launch of the State Quarters program in 1999. In the 1960s, such traditional imagery carried deep symbolic weight, especially during the Cold War, when national identity and unity were emphasized through everyday objects like coinage. In terms of mintage figures, the Denver Mint produced over 101 million quarters dated 1968 D, ensuring they were readily available for everyday commerce. This makes the coin fairly common in circulated condition, and most examples today are worth only their face value of 25 cents when worn from use. However, for collectors, the value increases when the coin is preserved in uncirculated or mint state grades. A 1968 D quarter in average circulated condition might trade for only a small premium above face, but coins that are well struck, lustrous, and free from wear can be valued between $3 and $20 depending on grade. Higher grade examples certified by grading services as MS65 or better can command even higher prices, sometimes ranging into the $50 to $200 range, while extremely high-end specimens with pristine surfaces may attract even more attention. Collectors also prize coins with sharp details, vibrant luster, and clean fields free of bag marks. In addition, any examples with mint errors, such as off-center strikes, double dies, or clipped planchets, can be significantly more valuable, depending on the rarity of the error. The historical context of the 1968 D quarter also adds richness to its story. The late 1960s was a time of great change in the United States, socially, politically, and economically. The nation was dealing with the Vietnam War, the Civil Rights Movement, and a rapidly changing culture. At the same time, inflation and rising metal costs had forced the government to modernize coinage by abandoning silver. Thus, the 1968 D quarter is not merely a coin for spending, but a small artifact of America's economic adjustment to new realities. It also marked the return of the mint mark on U.S. coins. Between 1965 and 1967, mint marks had been removed to discourage hoarding and speculation during the coin shortages of the mid-1960s. Beginning in 1968, however, mint marks were restored, making the 1968 D quarter the first Denver-minted Washington quarter to again carry its identifying D. This detail is particularly important to collectors, as it signifies the end of a short but unusual period in American numismatic history. Culturally, the 1968 D quarter is a reminder of the everyday lives of Americans during that era. These coins were used in laundromats, payphones, vending machines, and countless small transactions that made up the texture of daily life. A simple quarter could buy a newspaper, a phone call, or even a ride on public transportation. Today, looking back at such a coin connects collectors to the tangible, everyday history of the late 1960s, making it not only a collectible object but also a touchstone of memory and national experience. In summary, the 1968 D Washington quarter is a clad copper-nickel coin struck at the Denver Mint, bearing the classic John Flanagan portrait of George Washington on the obverse and a heraldic eagle on the reverse. It represents both continuity in American coin design and change in composition, reflecting the country's shift away from silver coinage. With a high mintage, it is common in circulation, but collectible in uncirculated grades, with greater value attached to pristine specimens and rare mint errors. Historically, it embodies the numismatic, cultural, and economic transformations of the 1960s. Though often overlooked as just another piece of pocket change, the 1968 D quarter holds within it a small but meaningful story of the United States at a pivotal moment in its history. The 1985 D Washington quarter is a fascinating coin from the United States Mint that reflects both the history of American coinage and the everyday circulation needs of the country in the mid-1980s. Struck at the Denver Mint, the D mint mark, below the eagle on the reverse or later next to Washington's bust on post-1999 quarters, identifies its origin. This coin belongs to the long-running Washington Quarter series, which began in 1932 to commemorate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. Designed by sculptor John Flanagan, the obverse portrait of George Washington replaced the Standing Liberty Quarter, and it remained in use, with only slight modifications, until the launch of the 50-state quarters program in 1999. The 1985 D quarter is part of this transitional era where quarters were struck not in silver, but in a copper-nickel-clad composition, a change that had occurred 2 decades earlier in 1965, when rising silver prices forced the U.S. Mint to eliminate silver from circulating quarters. Thus, the 1985 D coin is composed of an inner core of pure copper, clad with outer layers of 75% copper and 25% nickel, giving it a silvery appearance while actually containing no precious metal. On the obverse front of the coin, the central feature is a bust of George Washington facing left, his hair tied back in a simple ribbon, reflecting Flanagan's adaptation of Jean-Antoine Houdon's famous 18th-century sculpture of Washington. Above his head arches the word liberty, symbolizing the Central American ideal. To the left of Washington's profile, in smaller lettering, is the motto, "In God We Trust," which had become a standard inscription on American coins since the 19th century and reflects the nation's religious heritage and identity. Beneath Washington's bust lies the year of mintage, 1985, which identifies not only the production year, but also ties the coin to the historical and economic conditions of Ronald Reagan's presidency, a time marked by strong economic recovery and patriotic sentiment. The obverse design overall conveys tradition, stability, and national pride. The reverse, back, of the 1985 D quarter features a powerful image of a heraldic eagle, wings spread in a pose of strength and vigilance, clutching a bundle of arrows in its talons, which symbolize America's readiness to defend itself. Below the arrows rests an olive branch representing peace, showing the balance between military strength and the nation's desire for harmony. At the top of the coin is the national motto, E pluribus unum, Latin for out of many, one, referring to the unity of the states forming one nation. Encircling the upper rim are the words United States of America, while the denomination quarter dollar is inscribed along the bottom rim. The reverse design was meant to embody dignity, unity, and national pride, qualities that were seen as integral to America's identity during the Cold War era when such symbols carried heavy significance. In terms of mintage, the Denver Mint produced an enormous number of 1985 D quarters, over 500 million pieces, to meet the needs of commerce, as the U.S. relied heavily on quarters for vending machines, parking meters, laundromats, and daily transactions. Because of this large production, most 1985 D quarters are common in circulated condition and generally worth only their face value of 25 cents in everyday use. However, for collectors, the coin holds value when preserved in higher grades. In uncirculated condition, mint state, a 1985 D quarter may fetch between $2 and $10, with prices rising further for superbly struck examples graded MS67 or higher. Coins with sharp details, bright luster, and no signs of wear are prized among numismatists. There are also occasional errors and varieties, such as off-center strikes, clipped planchets, or double-die obverses reverses, that can make a 1985 D quarter considerably more valuable, sometimes reaching into the hundreds of dollars depending on rarity and demand. The historical context of this coin also adds to its significance. By 1985, the United States Mint had been striking clad coinage for 20 years, and the Washington quarter had become firmly established as a modern workhorse of commerce. It was not yet a collectible series in the way later state quarters would become, but it formed part of the everyday lives of millions of Americans. The coin circulated alongside others from the 1970s and early 1980s, bearing the marks of daily use, small scratches, and wear from countless exchanges. For many Americans, quarters like the 1985 D were associated with pocket change used for phone calls, arcade machines, or buying a newspaper, mundane yet deeply woven into the fabric of daily life. Today, holding such a coin allows collectors and enthusiasts to connect with that era, a tangible piece of the mid-1980s American experience. In summary, the 1985 D Washington quarter is a copper-nickel-clad coin minted in Denver as part of the long-standing Washington quarter series. With George Washington's enduring portrait on the obverse and the strong heraldic eagle on the reverse, it represents both America's founding ideals and its enduring strength. While not rare due to its massive mintage, it carries historical and collectible interest, particularly in high grades or with errors. For collectors, it is a reminder of the transition from silver coinage to modern clad coins, the artistry of John Flanagan's design, and the everyday economic history of the United States during the 1980s.